Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, did you miss me? Cam Rogers here on the Cam Rogers Show on this November 29th, 2017. Before I even get into the intro of the show, congratulations to Harris Rubenstein. Had a fantastic Cam Rogers Show in the fill-in job on Monday. Following some of the script, it looked like it was going to be a great show, and it went through as promised. So nice job by Harris on this past Monday, and, he's a fixture of the program. Hopefully have him back on soon, maybe a little totem pole action. I am Cam Rogers. Thank you for tuning into the program as I take you up until 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. There's a lot to get to today on this show. We'll go through the college football playoff rankings, the second to last edition of these rankings. We will get one more batch this coming Sunday, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, right here on Chat Sports. And I kept the times a little loose here today because, well, there's a lot to talk about in college in terms of these rankings here, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of the coaching candidates across college football. So I will talk to James Yoder, our Michigan football insider, in a matter of moments later today, because we'll talk about some of the more key names that we should watch out for some of the vacancies across college football, and most notably Texas A&M, and you have Tennessee, etc. So we'll get to that later in the show. And then switching over to NFL, talking about the New York Football Giants and the gross way in which they have handled the Eli Manning situation, the gross way in which they have handled this entire season. And look, I think Eli Manning has been the scapegoat in all of this, so we will talk about that later in the show. And sticking with the NFL, the quality of play problem. It has been quite apparent that we are in even more trouble with quality of play now that Geno Smith will be starting at the quarterback position for the Giants. Yikes. And then finally, to wrap up the show, Tiger Woods back on the golf course. He tees off tomorrow just after 12 o'clock Eastern Time at the Hero World Challenge, his own event. Looks like he feels great. He's out driving Dustin Johnson on some of his drives, apparently. So Tiger Woods back into the fold in the golfing world. We'll see what happens tomorrow, but I'll give you a few things to expect from him as he tees off in his first tournament in about a year or so. So there you have it. By the way, you can comment, react, throw out your thoughts throughout the show here today. We are completely live here on the Cam Rogers Show, so we always encourage the discussion. This is a discussion show. We want you throwing out your thoughts about the many topics that I go through, and we will show them up on screen as we see fit. And you can get the podcast version of the Cam Rogers Show. Just search the Cam Rogers Show on iTunes. Subscribe, download, leave a review as you feel. And so I would certainly appreciate that. Hopefully you're enjoying your Wednesday morning. Back to the old grind this week for a lot of folks out there after the Thanksgiving holiday, but it's a beautiful time of the year because you got Christmas music and it just puts you in a good mood. I think it's a beautiful thing. So let's get into the meat of the program here today. We are going through the latest batch of the college football playoff rankings, and there you see 21 through 25 right there, Fresno State kicking things off in the rankings at 25. They have a Mountain West championship to be played versus Boise State. Boise State was previously ranked, not anymore. NC State there at number 24, Mississippi State at 23. They, of course, lost Mr. Dan Mullen to Florida. But the good news is they now have a new head coach in Joe Moorhead, former offensive coordinator for Penn State. Talk about that a little later with James Yoder. But obviously that was the big headline coming out yesterday with Mississippi State. Virginia Tech at number 22. Speaking of coaching rumors, Justin Fuente has been part of the coaching sphere and perhaps going to another school. So we'll see if any of that comes to fruition. Northwestern, number 21. The big thing with them, that's the best win that Wisconsin has right now. And if Wisconsin loses the Big Ten championship game, that's all they will have on their resume, which means they're not going to the playoff if they lose the Big Ten championship. Essentially what I'm saying right there. But Northwestern, 9-3 on the campaign. Really nice year in the Big Ten for them. So that's 25 through 21, and I will have more to say as we get to the lower part of the rankings because I want to spend some more time on those. So 20 through 16 here. Memphis, what a year they've had. Riley Ferguson there at the quarterback position, scoring a lot of points for those Tigers, and Norvell doing a great job as the head coach, and Memphis will be taking on UCF in the American Conference Championship game. Also, what I call the soon-to-be departed Coaches Bowl, because I think Norvell and Scott Frost will be gone, respectively, from those schools and off to new positions. Frost perhaps to a Nebraska, Norvell maybe to somewhere down in the southeast. Who knows? And so that's what I have there as kind of like the title for that game. Like it could be the last game for both these head coaches. It'll be a fun game to watch, no doubt about it, this coming weekend. Oklahoma State, they still have their guy in Mike Gundy. He is remaining with the Cowboys. There were rumors that perhaps he would go somewhere else, perhaps a Tennessee, perhaps, who knows. But obviously, we do know that Gundy is remaining with Oklahoma State. So, good news for him. And good news for Cowboys Nation. Gundy has been a fixture of that program. And so we'll get into more of the details with the signing in terms of Gundy remaining there later in the show when we get to that coaches portion of this show. Washington State falling to number 18. Fresh off a 41-14 drubbing against Washington in the Apple Cup. Was not a great performance by Luke Falk. He had 3 interceptions in that game. Washington State wrapping up the year at 9-3, obviously going to a bowl game. LSU at 9-3. Nobody would have projected this team to be at number 17, getting close to the end of the year, especially considering the loss to Troy at the beginning of the season. So a big-time turnaround for the Tigers there. Competed nicely against Alabama. Obviously did not win that game, but I digress. Very nice turnaround there for Coach O and LSU after what was, a beginning that really did not have a lot of good headlines, positive headlines, we shall say. Michigan State there at number 16, 9-3 on the campaign this year. Floated around in the Big Ten East conversation, but the situation with them was that it seemed like the Big Ten East essentially just cannibalized themselves, beating up on each other, and so Michigan State kind of on the lower end of that, 9-3 on the year there for the Spartans. 15-11, Notre Dame at 9-3, and we all knew they had a gauntlet schedule, especially the second part of their campaign, and we all knew that they were essentially playing in the playoffs after that loss to Georgia because the margin of error not very big for an independent team because they don't have a conference championship to kind of help them out. And so Notre Dame there is at number 15. UCF, number 14, as I said, they'll be taking on the Memphis Tigers in the American Conference Championship game. Will Scott Frost go to Nebraska? We'll talk about that later in the show, hint, hint. Washington at number 13, 10-2 on the campaign. They had a nice game against Washington State not too long ago, and so 10-2 on the year, obviously a nice performance from them. We'll see if they get a New Year's Six Bowl. Stanford at 9-3, Stanford at number 12 here. Obviously notable because the Cardinals take on USC in the Pac-12 championship game, and the important thing with this is that, okay, yeah, can we put USC in the playoff conversation right now? If we had to, it'd be on the very, very end. Like, they are clinging on to the edge of the cliff, if you will, talking about the Trojans and their playoff chances to kind of use an analogy there. So they're the Trojans at number 10, 10-2 on the year. And if they were to beat the Cardinal and Stanford in the Pac-12 championship game, their 2 best wins would be against the Cardinal twice. So, I mean, there's not a lot to impress there if you're the committee. So USC, they got an outside shot. They're going to need absolute chaos in front of them for them to actually get into the playoff. Penn State at number 9. They will not be going to the playoff, but obviously in good position to perhaps get a New Year's Six Bowl. Nittany Lions losing Mr. Moorhead to Mississippi State, offensive coordinator there. Formerly had really a great system in place for Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley, and now there's a big gaping hole there. We'll see how they replace that coming up for the bowl game, and from a mental standpoint, essentially, for the bowl game, knowing that they won't have Moorhead anymore. Ohio State at number 8. So this is an interesting kind of situation here with Ohio State, and I do want to reference TCU here at the same time. So I want to talk about a scenario first off. If TCU wins the Big 12 championship game and Ohio State wins the Big 10 championship game, I think this would equate to serious chaos come Sunday afternoon. So, taking a step back here, what we know in that scenario is that the SEC champion would be in, the ACC champion would be in, and then from then on, it's a guess game. And in this instance, you know, you'd have a number 3 team and a number 4 team go down because Oklahoma sits at number 3 and Wisconsin sits at number 4, so they would be the losers in this scenario. So I think that blows the door wide open for the likes of TCU, Alabama, and Ohio State. Heck, maybe even a USC, but like I said, they're on the edge of the cliff right now. But they'll have to stop Stanford, talking 50 to like 10, and then, see what happens from there. But in this scenario, Wisconsin's gone because they lost. The committee obviously did not have a lot of respect for the Badgers at the beginning of the ranking season, if you will. And finally, they're inside the playoff picture. There they are at number 4. As we take a look at the graphic and the bracket here, Clemson at 1, Auburn 2, Oklahoma 3. And then you have Alabama at 5 and Georgia at 6, a couple of SEC teams. Sticking with this scenario here, though, if TCU wins the Big 12 and Ohio State wins the Big 10. So we're talking about essentially TCU, Alabama, and Ohio State at this point in time. Wisconsin's out. And as for TCU, I do kind of want to push them out of this situation as well because I feel like it'd be hard for the committee to put a team in TCU over an Alabama, over an Ohio State, and this despite the Horned Frogs taking down a top 4 Sooner squad. So, it's hard to imagine putting a 2-loss team over a 1-loss Alabama is what I'm essentially trying to say here. And so, for the sake of discussion, let's put TCU out of the picture here. Again, if you're just tuning in, the scenario is TCU wins the Big 12 championship game, Ohio State wins the Big 10. So it's Alabama and Ohio State. And I honestly think that there's a scenario here where Alabama and the Buckeyes get into the college football playoff if this goes down, if TCU wins the Big 12 and Ohio State wins the Big 10. So if the committee is torn between the Crimson Tide and the Buckeyes, why not just put both of them into the playoff and see what happens? Heck, maybe even manipulate the seedings a little bit so that Alabama battles Ohio State in the semifinal. So, it's a situation where it'll create a lot of controversy because you're putting perhaps Auburn at 4, or maybe you're putting Clemson, or you're putting Miami in a weird position as well if they win the ACC championship game. But I think, it's an interesting thought that the committee could manipulate the seedings here, 1 through 4, so that they can figure out who is the better team between Alabama and Ohio State, putting them both in and putting them battling each other in a semifinal game. Again, that's the scenario if TCU wins the Big 12 and Ohio State wins the Big 10. I don't think it's a likely scenario, but it's certainly a situation where we could face come Sunday afternoon. Another scenario I want to talk about here is if Ohio State wins the Big 10 and Oklahoma wins the Big 12. This is the scenario I think that's more likely here. So again, Wisconsin is gone because their best win would be against Northwestern. So see ya. SEC champion is in, ACC champion is in, Oklahoma is in, and now it's a fight for the 4th slot among Alabama and Ohio State. So the previous scenario was, well, okay, maybe there's 2 spots for Alabama and Ohio State. Now there's just 1. And so kind of talking about other options here, Miami is not getting in with a loss, I don't feel. And I think Clemson could have an outside chance to get in, especially if Auburn, a team they beat, wins the SEC championship game. So the argument for Alabama here, they are the only FBS team to rank in the top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency. They were number 1 and number 2 most of the season, according to these college football playoff rankings. And they are the eye test. They are the ultimate eye test team this year. And then you have the brand. And you have to really look at which brand is bigger in the committee's eyes. Which brand means more to this group of 13 people? Alabama's or Ohio State's. At the end of the day, that's what it could come down to. Now, the argument for Ohio State, they have the better resume. They have wins over Penn State and a would-be win over a number 4 Wisconsin team. And so people may bring up the 2016 Ohio State team, which finished in top 4 despite winning its division. And the thing with that was that Ohio State won a game against Oklahoma that meant a lot to the committee. Alabama does not have that win to help them out. They don't have that kind of out-of-conference victory at the beginning of the year to kind of aid them in getting into the playoff. And so perhaps they hoped that team would be, or that victory would be Florida State. Did not turn out that way because Florida State's pretty darn bad. And so we have a weigh-in for the folks at home. I'm going through the scenario right now. If Ohio State wins the Big Ten and Oklahoma wins the Big 12, will Ohio State get into the playoff? And we want your comments flowing in, etc. A lot of people try to make the argument that actually Alabama kind of is in a good position because they don't have to play an additional game and they can kind of sit back and just watch Georgia and Auburn kind of duke it out in the SEC championship game. One thing we know for sure with the SEC championship game, the winner is in and I'm thinking the loser is out. I mean, there's no situation where both Auburn and Georgia get into the playoff and Alabama doesn't. I just don't think that happens. And so, by the way, one of my favorite fan bases in college football, Sooner Nation, and I brought up earlier a scenario where TCU actually would win the Big 12 championship game. Boomer Sooner, I love you fans out there. I was just bringing up a situation, so if anybody out there is like, Cam, what the heck is wrong with you? I thought you loved us. I still love you. Don't worry about that. I think you win the Big 12 championship game and you get into the college football playoff. Just for the sake of discussion, I wanted to bring up the scenario where TCU would win the Big 12 championship and the chaos that would ensue. The scenario I'm talking about right now is if Ohio State wins the Big 10 and Oklahoma wins the Big 12, the situation that I think we will face come Sunday afternoon. And so the big debate there is who gets in at that number 4 slot, Alabama, Ohio State. Right? That's the big discussion at that point. So just to recap here, going through the bracket, you got Clemson at 1, Auburn at 2, Oklahoma at 3, Wisconsin at 4. I don't want to see Clemson versus Wisconsin. Do you folks at home? Like, do you want to see that semifinal? I think Auburn and Oklahoma would be very intriguing with Oklahoma's fantastic offense and Auburn's really good defense. But Clemson and Wisconsin, I think, would just really be a boring game. I would love a Clemson versus Alabama semifinal. That would be fun to watch. But Wisconsin, I think in terms of, putting, fandom aside here and looking at it from a third-party perspective, I don't think people really want to see Wisconsin in the college football playoff because I don't think a lot of people from, again, a third-party perspective believe in this team, that they can actually make it to the championship game and win a national title. I just don't think it can happen. And so we do have a reaction poll to wrap up this segment here because we'll get to some discussions about the coaching vacancies in college football. Do the Clemson Tigers deserve to be number 1? So throw in those respective reactions for all the folks at home. Give us a heart for sure. Give us a wow face for, all right, by default. Yeah, I mean, look at the other teams around them. Yeah, sure, they should be at number 1 for now. We'll see what happens in the ACC championship game. And I think a lot of people will be throwing up their wow faces. Give us a laughing face for know somebody else. Perhaps Boomer Sooner Nation believes Oklahoma should be at number 1 according to the college football playoff rankings. And then just throw your angry face if you hate Clemson. Give us a boo Clemson. And, I feel like we'll get a fair share of angry faces out there. I'm seeing a lot of hearts in the voting, a lot of laughing faces, a lot of mixtures here in terms of how people feel right now according to the college football playoff rankings. So, a lot of people also weighing in on the Clemson discussion, or actually the Ohio State discussion. Will they get into the playoff? And some people are saying no. So, I think there will be a situation where the committee is going to really drill down on resumes and eye tests and the brands between Alabama and Ohio State. And the big question is, who wins that argument? Because you could make the argument that it's 1A and 1B. in terms of the branding right now in college football, talking about Alabama and Ohio State. So those are the latest rankings, ladies and gentlemen. Friendly reminder, you can tune into the Chat Sports revealance of these rankings, 12 o'clock Eastern time, right here on Chat Sports. This coming Sunday, you're watching the Cam Rogers Show. I am Cam Rogers. We are going to hit a quick break. Coming up on the other side, the Michigan Football Insider, James Yoder, joining me live. We'll go through all of the coaching vacancies as a little bit of a teaser preview for our big coaches show across college football later today. It's the Cam Rogers Show. Stick around. Hey folks, welcome back to the Cam Rogers Show here on Chat Sports Facebook Live. We have the Michigan Football Insider, James Yoder. James, it's that time of year we are tracking where the planes are flying, if you will.
You know, I've changed my job title. It's College Football Insider. I've got insight all across college football at this point, but a lot of stuff going on with these coaches. Really, Sunday was one of the more interesting days we've had in the coaching search, saga in recent memory, with Tennessee revolting, getting a job offer kind of taken away from Greg Schiano. So it's exciting stuff, Cam.
All right, so before we get to the vacancies here, and by the way, friendly reminder, today, 4 o'clock Eastern time, we'll have our special coaches show here on Chat Sports. Very excited for that, and we hope you tune in later today. The news that came out just recently about a couple of coaches here. So, number one, we now have a head coach at Mississippi State, Mr. Joe Moorhead, former offensive coordinator for Penn State, and what a job he has done there in Happy Valley.
I mean, he really turned that program around in the middle of last season. They had a rough start, 2-2 to start the year last year, but by the time the season ended, they had the best offense in the country probably last year, maybe only second to USC, who they lost to in that Rose Bowl in one of the better games of the season. 52-49, I believe, was the final score there. He has some head coaching experience. He was at an FCS school, like we're showing there in Fordham. So I think it's a good hire, because Mississippi State is not a school that can take somebody else's coach. They might be able to grab somebody from a smaller, a group of 5 conference head coach, but I think Joe Moorhead makes a lot of sense there, and I think he's going to do a pretty good job. And he runs a different offense than they've run there with Dan Mullen. But I think Moorhead has shown that he can adjust to kind of his personnel.
A 3-time FCS playoff appearances there for Joe Moorhead. And this is a guy who I really like in terms of the system that he employs, in terms of offensive scheme, has a nice, unique mix of run-pass options, likes the big plays too, James.
Yeah, I mean, what they've done with Saquon Barkley, and then also with the quarterback, getting guys out in space in one-on-one situations, he is a coach that makes you defend. You know, it's very cliche to say, but he makes you defend, sideline to sideline, all 11 players, including the offensive lineman. Sometime you got to defend. So Joe Moorhead is going to bring a different style of offense to Mississippi State than they've had for the last 9 years under Dan Mullen. But I think it's one that can make an instant impact in the SEC West. Maybe he's going from maybe the hardest division in college football, the Big Ten East, to the second hardest, which is the SEC West. Now as a head coach instead of an O coordinator.
Okay, so Mr. Moorhead heading on down to be the next head coach for Mississippi State. Another news nugget here. Mike Gundy is remaining with the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. James, I was preparing the show last night. I was like, all right, let's talk about Gundy in Tennessee. I guess we don't need to anymore.
Well, he's a man. He's 50 now, and we finally got into flight tracking season yesterday with Mike Gundy. Also had the ever lovely, hey, here's a picture of a runway that's empty, could be anywhere in the world, but this is where the flight's going to land. Those were kind of popping up on Twitter yesterday, that Tennessee was coming to offer Mike Gundy the job. I think a lot of people expected him to at least entertain it. He also, what we heard, he got a look from Florida, turned that job down. I'll tell you what, if you're not going to take the Florida job. I don't think you're going to take the Tennessee job. So maybe they threw enough money at him. $7 million a year would have made him the fourth highest paid coach in college football behind Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, and Jim Harbaugh. Turned that down, sticks with his alma mater. He's an Oklahoma State guy. He was a quarterback there back in the late 80s. So I don't think it's too surprising that he turned down the Tennessee job. I would have liked to see him take that Florida job. I think he would have made a nice fit there. What I want to know, Cam, is why are you going to come with the big offer, $42 million over 6 years, to Mike Gundy after Greg Schiano turns you down? Why don't you make that offer up front? Why not go, okay, we're going to make a $10 million a year offer to John Gruden. He turns that down. Why isn't this your second offer right out there? Why do you wait until a candidate that no one from your program wanted? Obviously, we saw the fan revolt. Why wait till after that happened to, step up and be a big-time program and make a big-time offer? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think that's a great transition, James, as we talk about the vacancy there in Knoxville with Tennessee. And as we kind of go to our first name here, James, I do want to ask you, have the Volunteers been the biggest blunder in terms of coaching vacancies and the searches that's going on? I mean, it's safe to say that's been the case for them, right? They've been the biggest culprit.
Well, I think you can kind of look at this year, absolutely, and it reminds me a lot of what's happened at Texas in multiple coaching searches, where you've got the coaching searches go on for probably longer than a lot of people anticipated them to. You didn't necessarily right out of the gate go after your main candidate. Specifically 4 years ago when they got Charlie Strong, they really struggled along trying to go after guys like John Harbaugh, trying to go after Gruden, was rejected by all of them. They finally got it right with Tom Herman last year, but this is definitely the biggest blunder of this coaching season, Cam, by far, because I've actually been really impressed with schools like Mississippi State and like Florida and like UCLA, who have turned around, their last regular season game to a coach in a matter of days. Super impressive process they both run. I think we'll see the same with Nebraska once UCF plays their last game this week, and they get Scott Frost to come home, where he quarterbacked them to a split national title in 1997.
We will get there. Stay tuned for that. This is the Cam Rogers Show. Cam Rogers alongside our college football insider, James Yoder. We're going through some names here with Tennessee. Let's start off with a name that I read about last night. Kevin Steele, Auburn defensive coordinator. He's done a great job with the Tigers there, and it was a report out of ESPN that I saw that there was some interest between these two in Tennessee and Kevin Steele. I think it would be a nice pickup.
It'd be one, I don't imagine this would get any better reception than Greg Schiano would, frankly, right? So Kevin Steele, he's had head coaching jobs before. He's been a defensive coordinator at a lot of big programs, but has really been a journeyman coach here. So I don't think this is the one, Cam, that's going to get any more acceptance from the fan base than Greg Schiano did. Actually, I think it might be a step down from Greg Schiano. Schiano has shown that he can turn around a program. Kevin Steele in his head coaching jobs, previously, has not shown the ability to kind of win potentially at the highest level. People forget, 10 years ago, 10 years and a month ago, Greg Schiano had Rutgers as the number 2 team in the country at one point in early November of 2007. Now, they lost a couple games out of there. Certainly didn't win a national title or even a Big East title, but that's the kind of level he's taken that program to. So I thought it was an okay hire. I'm not sure why the revolt. I think they try to blame it on some things like his involvement with Penn State, but I don't think this is going to get anybody excited.
All right, Kevin Steele is our number 3 name. How about this guy who's been a fixture of many coaching rumors across all of the respective vacancies here? Scott Frost, UCF head coach. He's got a game to deal with this weekend, but he's certainly more of a guy we should watch in Nebraska. But could you see it make sense in Tennessee? Obviously not so much as Lincoln, but...
Well, I think that he would get people excited. I really am so impressed with what he's done in just 2 years at UCF. They were an 0-12 team the year before he got there, 2 seasons ago. They have a chance to go undefeated, 13-0, undefeated season when he takes on in a conference championship game this weekend. So he's clearly a top candidate. They're not probably going to have the opportunity to make him the offer that I think would get him interested in the offer, because I do think that Nebraska, who we'll talk about here in a second, has targeted him. They're waiting for that final game to be over to make him an offer. But here's what Tennessee has that Nebraska doesn't have. They have big-time boosters, big-time billionaire boosters that can put the money in front of Scott Frost to make him at least consider it. So if you're going to make that kind of offer to Mike Gundy, I think Scott Frost is the next Urban Meyer, a guy who can come in and turn your program from a 4 or 5 win program and to a 10-win program overnight, year 1, year 2. So I think if Tennessee wants to make Scott Frost their head football coach, they need to not delay. They need to be waiting in the locker room the second that the conference championship game game is over this week and say, hey, here's $6 million, here's 6 years, $42 million, here's 6 years, $50 million, whatever it takes, because he can turn your program around, and I don't think a guy like Kevin Steele is going to.
Tennessee has money. There's no doubt about that, and they are flowing it across all of these candidates right now. Let's get to our number one guy, Jeff Brom here, Purdue head coach. Purdue was awful last year, James.
Yep.
I mean, you're a Big Ten guy. And, somewhat of a turnaround for the Boilermakers this year. And so Brom has been in some head coaching discussions here. And before we get to Brom here, I want to say the big thing with Tennessee that they really want to turn around, James, they're 0-11 against rival Alabama since Nick Saban took over in Tuscaloosa. I think it comes down to that. I mean, they have to be competitive in the SEC again. And so can Brom do that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know anybody can do it. I think you could hire any number of coaches, and they're going to have trouble taking Tennessee to the Alabama heights in a short period of time. So I don't necessarily think that you're going to expect any coach to come in, and they play, even though they're in different divisions, that's a locked-in rival. Tennessee and Alabama play each other every single year. So I think you're just chalking up a loss for at least 2 or 3 years before you can have a chance to be competitive. But what makes this a good hire, I think the fan base would accept him because he runs a very up-tempo offense. He's a known tough guy. He was a quarterback himself. But more importantly than anything, he coached in SEC country recently. Just a year ago, he was at Western Kentucky. And I think there's that level of familiarity that their fan base is going to have with him. And the fact that he's not a D coordinator like Schiano or Kevin Steele were, and he's probably not a guy who would ever look for another job. I'm not saying that Scott Frost would be that guy, but you always have in the back of your mind Scott Frost, if he took your job instead of Nebraska, that one day, as they say, Mama's going to come calling and he's going to eventually take that Nebraska job, whether it be obviously not this year, but 5 years down the road. And so I don't think you'd have that here, and I think it'd be a coach that the fan base would universally accept as the coach. There would be no revolting, there would no be any message boards, there would no be painting. I don't know if you saw that, painting the rock on campus with defaming language on their previous head coaching choice. So I think this would be a good pick. I think this is probably the most likely at this point that he's going to get the job.
Okay, Tennessee still in search of their head coach, as are the Texas A&M Aggies. We have a few names for you folks out there. Here's a guy I really like, James. Chad Morris, not too far from us here at Chat Sports Studios at SMU, the head coach there, has done a pretty darn good job there for the Stangs.
Well, he's familiar, right? So he's in the state of Texas. He knows the high school coaches. He knows the recruiting landscape. He knows how to kind of go into the homes and talk to the parents. So recruiting is a big deal at Texas. If you're going to win at the highest level at SMU, you've got to get some of the best players in the greater Dallas area where SMU is located, which frankly they haven't done since they were paying them straight cash homie 30 years ago in the 80s that gave them the death penalty. So Chad Morris would be a guy that he's done a pretty good job. So to take that same level of success, take it over to Texas A&M, I think he could make an impact from day one, and I think it'd be a good choice. Now, he's not the splashy name that I think Texas A&M thinks they deserve to get. They're going for much bigger names.
We'll get there later.
They think they're going to get coaches, national championship level coaches there. But this is a very solid B candidate if you swing for the fences, and you got to have him as your backup choice.
All right, James, so you and Harris Rubenstein talked about this name, Chris Peterson, back on Monday, and I want to get your thoughts about this. Where's the interest there between A&M and Peterson?
Well, so Peterson has spent his career in that Northwest. He was at Boise for a long, long time, both as coordinator and then head coach, and then had all kinds of interests. Literally, he could have had his pick of jobs almost every year for a long time. And then there was a few years stretch that he just kind of put out there, I'm not interested in any job. And it was this Washington job that came open, geographically friendly to him, and he took it. Now, he led them to a playoff last year in year 2, super impressive, and he's right on the cusp of the playoffs this year. They're not going to make it in because of those 2 losses. But I don't know whether there's interest. There's not a lot of there's no back story of why he'd be interested in Texas A&M. The only reason why he would take this job would be money. That's the only reason. Texas A&M is going to pay more than Washington, their head football coach, almost at any time, unless an unknown Washington booster comes in and wants to make a donation to keep him there, which, historically, Washington has not made big hires, big dollar hires in either football or basketball. So I think Texas A&M could come in with an Urban Meyer, Nick Saban type of number, $8 million, $7 million a year, and Chris Peterson's at least going to give it some thought, although I would say it's probably unlikely he takes the job. Okay,
James, so you mentioned the Aggies want an A-lister there as their head coach. Let's get to our number one guy here, Jimbo Fisher, and the report out just this morning past midnight. Florida State doing background research on Oregon head coach Willie Taggart in anticipation. Jimbo Fisher leaves for A&M. James, what more do you know?
Yeah, so why would he take this job? I think all things being equal, you would never take the Texas A&M job if you're the coach at Florida State and your job isn't on the line, which they've had a bad season, but I don't think anyone's calling for his head in Florida State. This is a national championship coach, Cam. How many coaches have won national championships out there? Well, you've got Urban Meyer, you've got Nick Saban, and you've got Jimbo Fisher. Unless I'm missing somebody, those are the only 3 active coaches that have national championships that are out there right now. I'm sorry, and of course Dabo Swinney from Clemson last year. So why would he make this move? It sounds like it's not more about football, it's more about personal. We've heard about the illness that his son has. We've heard about the care he can get in the hospital in Houston that's world-renowned, and it's within a short drive of Texas A&M. So it sounds pretty likely that this is not just a John Gruden style, we're going to throw a name against the wall and get people excited. This seems like it's really in play. Florida State's going to play a game this weekend that wasn't normally scheduled because they had to make up a game from earlier in the year. So I think this thing could really heat up on Sunday. I'm excited to talk about it more in our college football coaching rumor show this afternoon. But this one sounds like in play. And if it happens, Cam, this would be the biggest program-to-program move, I think, in the history of college football. That you've ever had a coach of this stature to accomplish what he's accomplished there, a Heisman winner, a national title, another playoff appearance, and make a lateral move, and I would say make a slight downward move to another program. It never happens. Even Urban Meyer, who made a similar move, took a year off, stepped away from the program for a year, then before he went to Ohio State, he didn't make that direct jump. So it would be crazy. It sounds much more likely in the last few days than I anticipated it would be when I first heard about it, though.
It seems like the wheels are turning right now for Jimbo Fisher to head on over to Texas A&M and College Station. The Aggies haven't won a conference title since 1998, haven't won a national title since 1939. All right, let's get into Nebraska here. We'll go a little quickly here in the interest of time, but James, this is a name that I found. Craig Bohl, Wyoming head coach, and the Cowboys have actually had a pretty darn good year, and it seems as though there is going to be some sort of dialogue between Nebraska and Bohl. Of course, we know Nebraska, their number one guy, Scott Frost. We'll spend more time on him later. But what do you think about Bohl here?
Well, he's a backup option. That's all he is. They've got to. There's a couple guys we're going to talk about here, 2 at 1, that fit the program a lot better. So this is the guy that you keep on speed dial, and they've engaged with him. He knows that if Scott Frost wants the job, he's getting it. If another name we're going to have come up here wants the job, he's going to get it. And he also knows that these jobs for him are not going to come up every year, and this might be an opportunity to jump that. So I don't think by going for the A names that we're going to talk about here in a second, or B+ names, that they're going to lose Bohl to another job by any means. He is there, hey, our number one candidate's going to decide to stick at his program, or he's going to take another job potentially. Our number 2 says no. Okay, cool. We 24-hour turnaround. We've got our head coach in Bohl. So I think that's what they're relying on. But he wouldn't get anybody excited. He's not going to get anybody any more excited than Mike Riley, which was one of the more stranger coaching hires we've ever seen 3 years ago at Nebraska. So I don't think Nebraska fans would be too happy with this one if that's the ultimate one, because they've got their eye on the prize we're going to talk about here in a second.
Right. And so in sum, number 2 to number 3, big time drop off. Let's get to number 2. Kyle Whittingham, he has done a great job at Utah and really a great job in the Pac-12. And so he's got a lot of experience and a guy that obviously makes some sense. He's not too far from Nebraska.
And he has taken that program from the Mountain West Conference to the Pac-12. And they had a couple of years in there where they weren't performing as well as I think people anticipated them, because if people remember, he had an undefeated team in 2008 that went to a major bowl game and beat Alabama and Nick Saban in 2008. And then a couple years later, they go to the Pac-12, and he's mired in mediocrity. But the last 3 or 4 years, he's kind of elevated the program back up to a national level. They have been in the top 10 for long stretches at times, specifically last year, where they had a chance with some games that went their way to be in the playoff discussion for a while. There ultimately didn't happen. So he would be a good backup choice. I would be interested to see if he would really entertain this one, but he fits Nebraska. He's recruited in a I'd say talent-less states, like in Utah, like Nebraska. There are not a lot of big-time recruits that come out of Nebraska. Same as Utah, you've got to go outside the state. Nebraska's got to come down to Texas and Oklahoma. Utah's got to go to California to get the players they need to compete. So I think Whittingham would be a great choice. I think that'd be a B+ hire for them. And if this number 1 guy didn't exist, it'd be an A hire.
That's right. And that number 1 guy is Mr. Scott Frost, UCF head coach. Talked about him a little bit earlier, but James, this is the prized possession for the Cornhuskers.
He's the prized possession. It's very similar to Jim Harbaugh coming back to Michigan, and Urban Meyer, although he didn't attend Ohio State, he's an Ohio guy, coached there 25 years ago as a grad assistant, and so this would be the prize. He is young. He can be there for 20 to 25 years, like Ohio, like Nebraska has had in their long stretches with Tom Osborne and his predecessor. They went a good 45-year stretch with two head coaches from the 60s through the mid to late 90s when Tom Osborne hung him up in 1997. And then since then, it's just been a new coach every 4 years since then. And so Scott Frost, he's never going to leave that program. He's going to instantly give them a sense of credibility, recruiting, a sense of credibility. It'll make Nebraska, make Nebraska football great again. This is your guy, and he will get them back in contention in 2 or 3 years. It'll make the Big Ten West competitive because, frankly, since they realigned the divisions 3 years ago, it's been Wisconsin and nobody else really. I know Iowa had a good year a couple years back, but Wisconsin basically dominates that side of the division. Nebraska will get back to their stature as a major college football program with Scott Frost.
And another question with Frost here is that, do you think he could bring the Floridians on over to Lincoln?
Potentially. It's not going to be the guys who would normally go for Florida State, Florida, Miami. It will be the guys who go to UCF or FAU that turn into stars, the low 3 stars, high 2 stars, or the guys who potentially sometimes go up to schools like Rutgers or like Boston College or like Maryland. The player number 75 through 200 in the state of Florida every year, he can get them to come to Nebraska, and I think he will. He's going to plant his flag in the state of Texas and the state of Florida to get the recruiting funnel back going to Nebraska like it was for the longest stretch. People forget, up until about 2000, 2001, Nebraska was what Ohio State is now, just a model of consistency, of winning, of excellence for a 40-year stretch until they've kind of lost their way since about 2002.
Okay, so Nebraska there still searching for their guy. James, for Arkansas here, I'm going to go through these 3 names real quick, and I want you to harp on one of them. So we got Mike Leach there at number 3, Washington State head coach. We have Chad Morris again there at number 2 there for Arkansas. And number 1, Mike Norvell, Memphis head coach. He's got a game this weekend, and hey, he's battling Scott Frost.
Yeah, this will get the people excited. He has come kind of, I don't want to say out of nowhere because that's not fair to him, but when you take a Memphis program that has little or no college football, tradition, history, to the level of success they're showing this year with one of the more exciting offenses out there, I think it's going to get people at Arkansas super excited. Talk about Arkansas when they've had major success. It wasn't Brett Bielema when he tried to bring a ground and pound, Big Ten style, really a Wisconsin style. They're really the only program that runs that style of offense consistently anymore. Mike Norvell is going to bring an exciting, a style of offense that they had under Bobby Petrino, where they saw their highest of highs they've had over the last 20 years or so, was when Petrino was there, when they had Ryan Mallett as quarterback. They went to a major bowl game, to a at the time BCS bowl game, and faced Ohio State. So Norvell is going to get people excited. He's going to run the kind of offense, because listen, you can't beat Alabama by being Alabama, and that's what Brett Bielema tried to turn Arkansas into. So you can beat Alabama by trying to be Ohio State or trying to be what Auburn's become, be more of a spread you out kind of offense. So I think Mike Norvell will be an excellent hire there. I don't think that Mike Leach would fit, although I think a lot of people want to see him there because the heightened awareness of all of his quirky, funny things he says would be all over the SEC network and radio stations that you just don't get up in the Pacific Northwest at Washington State. Okay,
so Arkansas there. Let's get into Arizona State to wrap up this segment here, James, and we'll blow through the first 2 names. Derek Mason, Vanderbilt head coach there at number 3. Kevin Sumlin there, and he, of course, was the now no longer Texas A&M head coach, and we have him on our radars. But the number 1 guy we want to talk about, Herm Edwards, ESPN analyst, and obviously somebody that is currently interviewing with Arizona State.
Yeah, well, he said you play to win the game. That's probably what he's most known for more than his coaching career. But really, really, really odd just name out of nowhere, frankly, Cam. I don't know where this one. I don't even know why you entertain this coaching hire. It would be a splash name for a little bit, and he's got some credibility with NFL players because of his work in the media now. But he is not going to win at Arizona State. I think this would be
since 1989, James, since he's coached for a college team.
I think this would be a terrible hire. I know it's getting the Arizona State fans excited for some reason, but I think this is his agent put out his name as like, hey, Herm's looking to get back in the game. Hey, I heard Herm's wife might be in Phoenix looking at real estate right now. Throw that out there. Maybe he's worried about ESPN laying him off. I saw they laid off another 150 people today. Maybe that's why he wants a little bit of a raise, a little competition for his contract. You never know what's going on there.
Right.
This would be a disaster of a hire. It would be exciting for about 2 games until they get beat 58-0 by USC, and then people are like, man, Herm Edwards, what the hell were we thinking?
Yeah, I don't think he's really an exciting guy. I mean, I love him from an X's and O's standpoint, but I don't know if he brings the fire that Arizona State needs right now. But hey, no pun intended with the Sun Devils. But
they've got to get someone. He would be a great fit there. His style of football fits much better in the Pac-12 South than it ever was going to fit in the SEC West. And think about Kevin Sumlin for a second. If Texas A&M doesn't go to the SEC in his first year as coach there, I really think his ceiling and his ability to perform at the highest level of college football would have been much greater, much likelier chance. It's just like you're going against the Big 12, which frankly is not as strong as the SEC West. And so Sumlin was up against those expectations of competing with LSU, Alabama, Auburn versus, not as nearly as a strong lineup of teams in the Big 12, especially during that period, Texas being so down over the past 8 or 9 seasons.
Okay, James, we'll do it later today, my friend, 4 o'clock Eastern time, our Coach's Rumor Show here on Chat Sports. Appreciate the time, sir. Good stuff as always.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, as we have a weigh-in for the folks at home, what is the best coaching job in college football right now? So we look at the vacancies as we stand. We've got Tennessee, Texas A&M, Nebraska, Arkansas, Arizona State. Any prospective coaches out there on the Chat Sports lines watching this show? Where would you want to go? Throw in your thoughts, and we'll be showing them here on the program as we see fit. 10:47 on the East Coast. I'm Cam Rogers. This is the Cam Rogers Show. We're going to transition into the NFL because the big story coming out of that league was the fact that Eli Manning has been benched and he will not play at quarterback against the Oakland Raiders this Sunday. It's going to be Geno Smith, the ultimate failure for the New York Football Jets, ready to fail for the New York Football Giants. This has been a PR nightmare for the Giants. Number one, the Mayer family coming out in support of Ben McAdoo. Number two, the fact that an anonymous player or anonymous players have compared Ben McAdoo to Tom Coughlin in that McAdoo is the passive-aggressive type that will see you do something wrong and then suspend you later for it and not say anything at that moment in time. Part three, this. Eli Manning, the face of this franchise for the last 10 years or so, plus, now has been benched in favor of Geno Smith so the Giants can find out what they have in him. Why don't you throw him on the practice field? I think you can see what you have in them there. Now, I understand that's totally different than getting the actual game reps, etc. But what I'm trying to say here is that this was a big, fat mistake by the Giants franchise. And a lot of the players out there, former and current, came out in support of Eli Manning. Justin Tuck, there is his tweet from yesterday. Quote, "I'm honestly at a loss for words. As a person that has seen Eli the QB, but also Eli the man, I am truly PO'd about what has taken place today. This decision is one of the stupidest I've seen in my time being in pro sports. Hashtag no loyalty, hashtag 14 years, hashtag, well, you see it right there. Bullcrap." Justin Tuck chiming in. Marshawn Lynch had a great tweet. "The Giants benching Eli Manning for Geno Smith is almost as crazy as, not running the ball at the one with the Super Bowl on the line. Pete Carroll, have you seen that tweet, my friend? Yikes." And then OSC Umenyiora, who has been a fixture of the Giants' defensive lines in the years past. "Eli deserves much better than that, much better. Class person, class player. That's absurd." Eli Manning is the kind of guy that will not go out and speak out against this and say that I'm a competitor, I want to be back out there, and I disagree with this decision. Eli Manning is a class act that will go up and talk with the media, as he did yesterday, and gave his candid but also very, professional responses. And he was holding back tears when he was talking to the media and saying that it's an unfortunate situation. And look, as we showed in the player card earlier, Ben McAdoo gave Eli Manning the option to start and then eventually get replaced by Geno Smith so he could keep that streak alive that he has going on 210 games of starting at the quarterback position, second to only Brett Favre. And obviously, Eli Manning declined this, but this is just pathetic. This is a last-ditch effort by Ben McAdoo to save his job, to see if maybe he can get a win with Geno Smith or Davis Webb or whoever the heck it may be. And Eli Manning is essentially the scapegoat of the failure that has been the New York Giants this year. Yes, they've dealt with injuries. Yes, Odell Beckham Jr. most notably has been out for some time now. And so you have all those other factors, the poor drafting and that they're not addressing the offensive line right now, etc. But why give Eli Manning the stab in the back here? Actually, it wasn't a stab in the back. It was a stab right to the heart, right in his face, benching this guy. Two-time Super Bowl champion and MVP. 2007 postseason, won the wild card playoffs, won the divisional playoffs against the Cowboys, won the NFC Championship game against the Packers on the road, and then won the Super Bowl against an undefeated Patriots team. 2012 postseason, when they went 9-7 in the regular season, won the wild card playoffs against the Falcons, won the divisional playoffs against the Packers, and then won the NFC Championship game against the 49ers in overtime to go on to beat the Patriots yet again. And this is the kind of respect you show to that quarterback. Is it personal? No, but that's not the point. The point is the Giants have been a mess, as we have a reaction poll for you folks at home. Give a wow face for obviously, a heart for could be worse, and a laughing face for just straight up LOL because you were LOLing at all of this. And I think it's a mixture for me of wow face and laughing face at this point in time. I'm LOLing, and obviously the Giants are a mess. And so this is a big fat mistake, just to wrap up this segment here quickly for the interest of time. Not because of the X's and O's, because the Giants are out of the playoff hunt. In fact, they've been officially eliminated. This is a mess and a bad decision from a symbolic standpoint. Symbolically, it looks bad on Ben McAdoo. Symbolically, it looks bad on the Giants franchise. Because what you are essentially doing is you're putting the face of your team on the bench for the sake of what? Seeing what you have in what we already know from Geno Smith, seeing what you have in Davis Webb, maybe that would make a little more sense if you were to start him, because we don't know what to get from Davis Webb. We know what we're going to get from Geno Smith. And so it has been a critical error by the Giants organization. And finally, to wrap up, I talked to some friends last night who are Giants fans that follow this team closely. They all are on Eli's side, and this one do not side with Ben McAdoo. They want McAdoo fired, and some hope that Eli Manning goes to Jacksonville, reunites with Tom Coughlin, and balls out for the Jaguars with that defense with Leonard Fournette and a good cast of wide receivers. I think that's the most likely destination for Eli Manning. And just to wrap up, the Giants have failed Eli, and that's a sad situation. And because Geno Smith is starting at the quarterback position for the Giants, it's only going to make the quality of play in the NFL worse, right? It's oil. It's oil cans pouring on a fire at this point in time. And there was an interesting tweet out there that I saw, and I saw because one of our own, Harris Rubenstein, liked it among his 27,000 likes on Twitter. Actually, he had a good one here. Let's pull up the tweet, Lana Bond, and I want you to hold it up there, Lana, if you can, for the folks at home, because I think this is really staggering to me. Starting quarterbacks for Week 13 in the NFL, folks. There you go. Oh, my God. Geno Smith, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Brett Hundley, Jacoby Brissett, Trevor Siemian, Matt Moore, Josh McCown, Tom Savage, Blaine Gabbert, Mitch Trubisky, Deshaun Kaiser. And then at the end, shocking, the ratings are down. Look at that. That's all I really need to say. Just look. I mean, those are the names that you're going to be watching on the football field this week, this coming Sunday. It's a problem. Patty chiming in the comments section, NFL is a mess. You're absolutely right, Patty. Because you have names like these that will be playing at the QB position. And look, that's the reason why a lot of quarterbacks are getting paid so highly, because the the demand is so high and the supply is so low, going back to my AP macro days. And so, that's why the likes of Matt Stafford and Derek Carr and all these quarterbacks are getting paid so much, because it's a supply and demand situation right now. And for all of you NFL fans out there, myself included, I am so sorry that you have to watch this carnage come Sunday of these quarterbacks going out there and getting it not done, essentially. And so, look, some of these have played decently. Josh McCown has played decently. Blaine Gabbert actually played all right this past week. He played pretty well against his former team in Jacksonville. But we know that Geno Smith is not a good quarterback. Jacoby Brissett has shown flashes. Trevor Siemian was benched earlier this year. Matt Moore, are you kidding me? He got blown out on Thursday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens. And Tom Savage, well, you just saw him on Monday Night Football stinking up the joint against the Ravens as well. And so, look, I'm sorry, folks, but these are the quarterbacks that we will see on Sunday, and it's going to get worse for the NFL. It's going to get worse in terms of the ratings, in terms of the interest in the league. And that's why college football is doing so much better, because it's just more fun to watch for people. There's way bigger fan bases, it seems, at least more of an electric fan base in college football compared to NFL. Even when I do this show, when I talk college football, Boomer Sooner all throughout the comments section. A lot of talk about Clemson, a lot of talk about Alabama and the rankings and all of this intrigue. And then when we talk NFL, it's like, oh my God, what is happening? What is going on with this league right now? Why are the ratings going down? Well, folks at home, there is your answer. The quality of play problem is so bad, and a lot of it has to do with the quarterbacks that are playing for these respective teams right now. All right, folks, so that's the deal with the NFL. Big fat mistake by the Giants in benching Eli Manning. Eli, best of luck to you, my friend, when you play for the Jacksonville Jaguars next year. Looking forward to it. This is the Cam Rogers Show here on Chat Sports Facebook Live. We're going to wrap up the program talking about Tiger Woods. He is back on the golf course, making his big-time return to professional golf tomorrow at the Hero World Challenge. I had Mike Annalini, the VP of Tiger Woods events, on the show not too long ago to talk about Tiger's big return. And I am very excited for this. What to expect? A new swing, number one. He made a lot of changes to his swing. I think it looks a lot better now. He's not getting stuck on the downswing as much anymore. If you look at some of the tape out there that has been released in regards to Tiger's swing, he's going to be freer. I think he's going to be looser. You look at him with the media these days, and he's just so fun now. He's just having fun. He's not going out there with high expectations. In fact, one of the alarming statements that I saw from Tiger, and it's alarming because it is Tiger, was that he said that he doesn't even expect to win tomorrow at the Hero World Challenge, or I guess you could say on Sunday afternoon. He doesn't have that many expectations. And how can you when you have a guy who's gone through all these back surgeries and microdissectomies and all of this stuff? And so it's alarming because Tiger in the past used to be, oh, it's all about winning for me. I am playing this tournament to win. Even like in some of his past comebacks, that's what he has said. And so this feels like a new comeback for Tiger Woods. And so, yes, you should expect a new swing. You should expect him to be looser on the golf course. And this is very important to note. He played in this tournament a year ago. He led the field in birdies. So he knows how to score on this golf course, Albany golf course down in the Bahamas. And so something to monitor going forward. Tiger Woods, could he actually contend in this elite 18-person field at the Hero World Challenge? I think it's certainly a possibility. I'm not saying he's going to win the tournament. I'm not saying that, he's going to be hoisting the trophy on Sunday afternoon. But I could see him start off with a nice 2-under round tomorrow and then go forward and perhaps contend. And if not, score a lot of birdies because he knows that golf course pretty darn well. Good luck to you, Tiger Woods, and good luck to all you folks out there going through your Wednesday. Happy hump day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning into the Cam Rogers Show. We will see you Friday morning, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Enjoy your Wednesday and Thursday. We'll see you then.